Okay, hello there, everyone. How's it going? Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
hear you just fine, and good afternoon.
Good, good, good. All right, so we'll get going here. So for today, we're gonna do some of our lecture topics will be on the use of thumbnail sketching, kind of how we're gonna use that throughout the class, the best way to approach thumbnail sketching, how it will work with our creative process. And we will also be talking about shape versus form and how that will work with our artwork. All right. So before we get started on the lecture, I just wanted to kind of check in and make sure everything is going okay with Adobe Illustrator. Has everyone started those first few things that we went over last Wednesday? Has everyone looked ahead at Project 01 that is due next week? Any questions on that front?
I figured out how to change the outline of a box, but I couldn't figure out how to change the fill.
Oh, the fill. Let me show you that really quick.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can show you really quick, and then you can kind of go practice it after class on your own and see if that makes sense when you're doing it on your own here. Let's see. So yeah, I think I mentioned there's like multiple ways to do every task on Illustrator as we work. So here is just a basic, let me just draw a new shape. Let's just do a rectangle shape. So whenever this shape is selected, so right now it's not selected. It's just there in the artboard. When it's selected, that is when it has this kind of little blue highlight around the shape, and you can see the different anchor points, which are these little squares throughout the shape. So those are the anchor points that you can grab and move around. So when it's selected, whenever you want to get information about this shape, there's a couple places to look, meaning the information is what is the stroke and what is the fill, basically. So I always look right here. So can you see this little toolbar here when you're working there, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Cool. So whenever you have that, this shows you what the fill is, and this box here shows you what the stroke is. So this will just give you information about the selected shape. So if you have more than one shape, it will look differently when you click on different shapes. So I usually change the fill down here. So that's just double clicking this box and choosing a different color. I need to go figure out why my colors are looking weird here. So I just double click right here and it brings up a bunch of color options and you can choose your colors there. And then you can put this one on top and double click that and choose that for your stroke. That's one's over here. So now this one is selected, so you can see the fill and the stroke. And then when I select this one, it changes it to the value. So this one has the different fill and the different stroke. So I usually change it just down here by double clicking. You can also go up here and change it here. So this is a little drop down menu for your fill, and this is a drop down menu for your stroke.
Yeah, I actually did get that part. I was more meaning like with the brush of the pattern.
The brush of the pattern. You mean the pattern fills?
Yes.
Pattern.
As I was looking through the Project 1, I started playing around and it was like use 7 different boxes of different outlines and fills, and I was like, cool, okay, I finally figured out how to change the brush that goes around, but how do I change the middle?
Yeah, to add it, to make it like a pattern in the fill.
Yeah.
So that I find right here. So again, back to this drop down menu for the fill. So this gives you all these options for colors, fills, and then here's 2 fill options for patterns. You see this one's just included right here.
Okay.
These ones are cool, but we want everything in this class to be black and white. So
Yeah.
these ones are color patterns. It is possible to change those to black and white, but I'll just show you where a few other black and white pattern fills are, and there's a few options of those. So this little thing right here, swatch libraries menu. So this drops down and you can go to patterns and basic graphics. So these are all different patterns. These are these nature and these decorative ones are cool, but again, those are color ones. I kind of like these basic graphic ones. And now you can fill it with dots or these line patterns or some of these other ones. And I like these black and white ones just because you can end up using these on your projects later on. So they're kind of cool just to see which options there are. You know, you could use this for like a fill in of like water maybe, or this could be a texture on a wall or something like that later on when you're working on projects. So those are just here under here, this little library symbol, and then go down to patterns. So there's a few different steps to get that. So, but yeah, it's under this fill here. So I can hold this here if you want to like take a screenshot or write it down.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure that's in one of those videos at some point, but yeah, it is,
Okay.
it is a couple steps to get to those options there. But just knowing that this drop down menu has like a bunch of different things, you know, it's this one. So this can be like gradients in here. We'll use these later on towards the end of the quarter. But then once you use a few of them, then they kind of get saved here as well. So if you have ones you like, they'll get kind of saved here. And you can put a, you know, a pattern fill on the stroke, but I rarely end up doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any kind of general Illustrator Project 1 questions? Since Project 1's due in a week or next week, early next week. Cool. If anything comes up that you remember during class today, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, just remember you guys can always email me those projects before the due date if you want feedback on them. I can say, oh, this looks like it will probably be a B. Change X, Y, and Z if you want to get up to an A, or I can say this looks like it's going to be an A, you're ready to submit or whatever like that. Okay. And that goes with any project. You know, people that do the best in this class usually try and get feedback before that due date, rather than, you know, after the due date once the grade is already submitted. Oh yeah, I wanted to see what you guys thought of the drawing challenge, the line quality drawing challenge here. What did you guys think of that?
I like doing it, but like I put in the comment, landscapes are not necessarily my style of art. I mean, they're nice, but I tend to stress about them more.
Mm-hmm.
I have to agree too. I'm not the best at landscapes.
Well, that's good. If those are things that you guys don't feel as confident with, it's really good to draw things that you're not confident with, because that's ultimately what makes you better. If you just like drawing cute dog faces and that's all you do, you're not going to grow as much as an artist. So it's good to, try to draw different things, try to draw things you're uncomfortable with. But I thought that what you guys came up with was really well. And yet, Rebecca, this is yours. Yeah, this one came out really well. I like the line quality you use for the clouds and kind of all these sketchy lines you use for the grass, and then these really straight, strong lines. What kind of pen did you use here, Rebecca?
I used a couple different ones that had varying thicknesses.
Nice.
They're just kind of basic line pens.
Yeah.
I mean, I sketched it out in pencil before I did it with the pen, but yeah, they were just of varying thickness because I was like, oh, this will make the line way easier to do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to do it too. And like if you have those pins that are different weights or different thickness, just to have, 2 or 3 of those that you do the drawing with is a good way to do it. Yeah, Emily, this one came out well. I like these really bold lines you have around the house. Look how bold that is and how straight and strong these lines are compared to these really rough, sketchy lines for the grass. This one also came out well. I like how loose and kind of textured the lines are here in the clouds. And this one was also nice and switched up because it was made vertical instead of horizontal. So, you know, I feel like lots of times with these drawing challenges, I want you guys to have fun with it and be inspired by it. So, you know, changing up little things, the shape of the frame, adding stuff in there and stuff like that is good. I like to see. This one came out well too. So two different versions, one with pen and one with pencil, to just kind of experiment and see what different, you know, line qualities you can get with two different mediums. This one's has pen here on the house to make those lines really bold and dark, and then really thick kind of texturing lines in the grass is cool. So definitely take the time on these drawing challenges to look at each other's work. So even if you're like the first person to submit, come back later in a couple days and see what everyone else came up with. Because you can kind of borrow little things from people's style and be like, oh, I really like the way they made the house stand out, or the type of line quality they use for clouds. And then you can add that to your own drawings. I like the flat stylized shape of the clouds in this one too. These ones are like really simplified clouds. They're not trying to be too realistic, but they're just creating really simple shapes. So we're talking about shapes in class today. So this is kind of a cool example of cloud shapes there. So I thought they all came out really well, and it's also cool to see everyone draw the same thing. Even though everyone's drawing the same thing, we come up with all these different versions of the drawings. So we'll keep doing these. I will have a new one for you guys to do this week, and then we'll see if we go back in person, but we'll probably keep doing those throughout the quarter, most weeks in the class. And yeah, just kind of, and those are just 5 points. So it's kind of, you know, either you did or you didn't in terms of getting those done. Okay, so today let's talk about. All right, so this is kind of what we're going to talk about today. So thumbnails, kind of talking about the creative process of art in general and kind of the creative process in art for our class. Then we'll talk about shape-based art versus, or shape versus form, how they're similar and how they're different as well. Anyone ever heard of thumbnail drawings, thumbnail sketches?
Not really, other than the reading through. I think I was actually looking at project 2. You went through what you did and for an example, and I remember reading about your thumbnails and the different sketches.
Nice, yes, exactly. So thumbnails are going to be something that we include in every project, starting in project 2, 3, and 4. You're going to be including your thumbnails as part of the requirements for the projects. And thumbnails are just a way to kind of develop the creative process. So thumbnails are basically just rough, small drawings that you use to plan out a piece of final artwork. So no one ever just sits down at a giant blank canvas and starts painting oil paints on there and paints a masterpiece. You know, every artist has a way to plan out a drawing and to come up with a good composition and to come up with that good plan for how to execute a complicated idea. And so every artist uses some form of thumbnails and some sort of rough sketch to plan out a drawing. So let's really quick kind of imagine that we are an oil painter. And then someone wants to hire us to do an oil painting for them. They say, I want a picture of Mount Rainier. I want a really amazing painting of Mount Rainier. That's what I want to hire you to do to create. So let's just write that down. painting of Mount Rainier. Well, again, you're not just going to stand at a giant canvas and start painting things down on that, a blank white canvas. You need to plan that out, and you need to develop some ideas, and you need to, you know, oftentimes when you're working with a client, you need to show them a small rough drawing and say, this is what it's going to look like. Does this look good to you? And they'll be like, oh, that looks great. Go ahead. Or maybe move this around or change this somehow. So hopefully thumbnails should become something that's fun to do, something that can be kind of relaxing and allow you to explore and experiment. In last class, I talked about not worrying about the perfect drawing, about creating flawless artwork. Those thumbnails allow you to mess up. So those thumbnails kind of get out all those bad ideas or those ideas that aren't quite as good, and or just different ideas, things you may not end up taking to a final, but you can still come up with in a thumbnail. And they're usually pretty small drawings. So, you know, maybe 1, 2, 3 inches wide is a thumbnail. So what I'll do, so let's try and do this painting of Mount Rainier. What you'll do this on your own different projects. You just put a bunch of small blank frames on a piece of paper on your sketchbook. And then you can fill these up with different options for your composition. So Mount Rainier. So how do I want to draw Mount Rainier? Well, you usually just start with your obvious idea. Draw Mount Rainier there. There's Mount Rainier. Well, that's an okay option, but there's some other things we could do with it. What if we want to have, you know, some trees here in the foreground and have kind of Mount Rainier back here? Maybe we have some clouds in the sky as well. It's like, okay, I like this idea, but I still want the mountain a little bit bigger. So maybe we'll have the mountain a little bit bigger in this version.
Oh, when you're thinking about Mount Rainier, you have to think about Reflection Lake.
Oh, good idea.
It's really pretty. I mean, I had an aunt that lives on Mount Rainier, so going there, you can always see Reflection Lake at the perfect time, and you get this perfect picture.
See, that is something we would want to explore in these thumbnails. So what if we want one with Reflection Lake? So you get that reflection there. I've never actually been there. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's super pretty. It's really pretty. I remember when I went, you'd just see, like, you know, anywhere between 1 to 5 photographers that are sitting there with their cameras and a tripod, just waiting for the sun and the clouds to be in the right spot to get that perfect picture.
You got to with a view like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we want the sun or the moon behind it there as well. And we can still put some trees here in the foreground. Or maybe we like one that feels very kind of quiet and still, and the mountain's just really small. So then you would, so then you can kind of look at these, and because they're done so quickly, it allows you to go through a bunch of different options with these thumbnails. And you could take these to a client. In this class, I'm going to kind of be the client, and I'm going to be working with you guys. And when we do critiques, I'll kind of give feedback on your thumbnails. You guys will look at each other's thumbnails and give each other feedback as well. But this allows you to see the entire composition, try out a bunch of different options, and kind of decide which one you want to go forward with and which one you want to take to a finish. So for our creative process, it's going to be, you know, you have an idea, you make a thumbnail. Sometimes you refine that thumbnail, and we'll call that a workup sketch. We don't do this for every project. And then you go to final art in Illustrator. So that's our creative process. Okay, and so that's on each project, project 2, 3, 4. I want to see how you use this creative process. Having an idea, this thumbnail should just show me a variety of options. How many different ideas can you come up with? How do you change and adjust that idea when you do your workup sketch? And then how does it really come out to that final art? So each one will change along that step of the way, hopefully getting better and better each step. But those thumbnails, like I said, you can experiment, you can play around, and you can do different stuff with those thumbnails as you work and as you come up with different ideas. And these thumbnails, for the most, these will always be in your sketchbook. It's just faster to directly draw there. And each thumbnail should only take about, 5, maybe 10 minutes. If you're spending 20 minutes, half hour on a thumbnail, then it's no longer a quick rough sketch. Then it's something, then it's, more of a study or more of a finished piece of drawing or artwork like that. So thumbnails are fast, loose, sketchy, and a lot of times imperfect, just going through a lot of different options that you may come up with. So for the next drawing challenge this week, I'm going to have you guys come up with just thumbnailing for thumbnailing's sake. So sometimes I'll do that just in my sketchbook, just coming up with thumbnails just for the heck of it, even if I don't have an intention of taking it to a final art or making it into anything more, but it can be fun to do that. And then maybe it'll spark an idea down the road somewhere later on. But just going through this process and doing those small, quick drawings will help you guys come up with lots of different ideas and hopefully unlock some creativity that you're working with. Does that make sense? Any questions on thumbnails? Okay. I'm going to show you some cool example of thumbnails. Where do they go? All right. So anytime you have a chance to see artist thumbnails, it should be a really, good opportunity. You don't always get to see artist thumbnails. Lots of artists don't want you to see their thumbnails because that's kind of seeing how the sausage is made, seeing how they get to these really complicated compositions. So lots of times with really complicated compositions, you have a number of tough and intricate steps to go through in order to get to that final art. So this is artist Glenn Orbeck. He is an illustrator, a cover artist. He's done book covers, comic book covers, oil paintings, paintings for advertisement, things like that. But he has a very detailed style and has created very complicated compositions. And in order to do that, he needs to carefully plan everything out with thumbnails. So I'm just going to skip ahead to this is a piece of final art. So I think this is probably for a book cover or something like that. So it can be intimidating when you look at a piece of art like this because it's super complicated. It's really well done. You can look at that and be like, how the heck did he get to this? He must be some sort of master level genius to be able to paint like this. Well, he is, he's very smart and good at what he does, but to get to this complicated finished product, there are some logical steps that you can take in order to help you succeed as an artist. So again, he didn't just sit down with a blank white canvas and start putting down yellow and start painting these guys with his brushes. So it's cool to see where he started. So here's his first thumbnail. So he probably came up with, a number of different options here for that overall composition. But I really like seeing artist thumbnails. You can see the energy in here. It allows you to see kind of his thought process, different things he's playing around with, things that ended up changing as he went through the process there. So lots of times, if I can see artists, that's what's cool about like Instagram now. A lot of artists will post their process pictures. Lots of times in like graphic novels, in the back of that, the artists will post their rough sketches. Sometimes museum exhibits will just display artist drawings, which is really cool to see. So yeah, this must have been some sort of cover because it looks like he's planning to have text, space for text up there. So he talked with the client and they decided on this thumbnail, and then he gets to work. So he has his creative process is different than ours. So every artist is slightly different. So this is his value composition. So he's just figuring out where the darks and lights will go to make sure everything stands out. So he has dark shapes against a light background, using values to make things stand out that way. And then what he does is he takes reference photos. So we will use reference photos in this class on different projects. Now, this is what helped him get all those complicated poses. So drawing things like folds in clothing, facial expressions, hands, those are all really hard to draw. So there's very few artists. There's some that can just, start coming up with character poses right out of their head. But most artists, a vast majority, use some sort of photo reference to help them figure out stuff, weird poses, hands, everything that's, hard to draw. So, he took these models and he showed them this rough sketch and say, I need you to be throwing a punch. I need this guy to be falling over. I need you to be holding the gun and kind of leaning back, and use that to show the overall poses of these different characters. Then he does a finished line drawing here. So this is kind of the finished line drawing of what he'll be doing. And then he does a color thumbnail. So just a thumbnail to plan out the colors. And then he makes the final art. So there's a lot of steps to get to that final art. So I like seeing it. It gives me more appreciation for the final art, but also really gives me an insight of how he got there. And hopefully, I can learn something when I look at artists' steps and process they take, because then I can apply some of this to my own work. And so hopefully you guys can do that as well. So just here's some of his other covers and work that he's done. So here's a cover for the Punisher comic book. So thumbnail sketch, reference photo. Here's just a study. We'll do some studies at some point as well, where he's just kind of figuring out the pose of this character, the shape of the gun, how the hands wrap around it. There's this color thumbnail, and then the final drawing, and then the final art. Sorry. So he has a very detailed, realistic style. So some artists that have a more cartoony or simplified style, they don't have quite as many steps in their creative process. So this is a cover for like a crime novel of some sort. But you can see thumbnail, photo reference. Here he's like cutting out the the model's head, posting it on top of a rough sketch, and he's using photos for the background and kind of comping them all together and then doing the painting based on that. So cool process. Here's thumbnails for a Batman cover. So it's cool to see 4 different versions of that cover. And then this one in the middle is what he decided on. Reference photos, costumes for the reference photos, color thumbnail, and the final art. So our art obviously is not that realistic that we're going to be making in this class. Ours is going to be a little more stylized and a little more simplified. So our process will be a little bit different, but you know, it's still good to kind of look at this and see what we can take from this and apply to our own work. So yeah, I think each project will require 10 to 15 thumbnails.
That first project isn't gonna need a thumbnail, is it?
Yeah, correct. Only
Okay.
starting on project 2, yeah.
I'm like, that's just kind of been like a thumbnail
Exactly, yeah. So
with the tools.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so starting on project 2, I think project 2, yeah, the first step is 10 to 15 thumbnails. And I like forcing you guys to do those thumbnails because I mentioned just getting you drawing and having you sketch and having you come up with different compositions is really going to be a way to help you guys improve as artists and make this class easier if you can get comfortable doing lots of those sorts of quick drawings as you work. So it's always going to be a part of the process. And you can kind of take things from this class's creative process, and then when you're doing your own work later on, you can kind of figure out what you like best from that creative process. And then, you know, use it for if you're doing, you know, movies or watercolor paintings or oil paintings or whatever you're doing on your own later on, you can use some sort of creative process that starts with thumbnail sketches. But yeah, it's cool to see his work as well. All right, any questions on thumbnails?
Is that I mean just the thumbnail, is it like a 1 to 3 inch size? I mean just the size. I just want to know that.
Yep, yeah, approximately 1 to 3 inches on that, on, you know, one side of it.
Okay.
So pretty small.
Yeah, pretty small. I thought it's gonna be like a half of the sketchbook.
No, yeah. Keeping it small is definitely key. Like that allows you to go faster. And when it's small, it forces you can't get a lot of details. So I find a lot of people will get caught up in those details. I know that's kind of a thing that separates, you know, an experienced artist from a student artist. Student artists will get like really caught up in just drawing lots and lots and lots of little details. But they kind of ignore the overall composition. So when you draw small, you can see the overall composition better.
And only 5 minutes for one, isn't it?
Yeah. 5 to 10, maybe 10 max. But yeah, if you're going longer than 10 minutes, then that's too long.
And it's not it's not a thumbnail.
Exactly. Then it just becomes a drawing.
Okay.
And maybe even less than 5. You know, you can do thumbnails in 30 seconds too, as well.
Yeah, I did get some idea first, but
Yeah. And yeah, when I was looking at these pictures too, like you can get ideas from pictures online. What's that?
is that anything? Is it okay, right? Anything.
Yeah, we'll all have specific prompts later on.
Oh, okay.
I can show you the drawing challenge. So I'll publish this one later today. So this will kind of be your prompt for the drawing challenge this week.
Oh, oh,
Here's your prompt: a barn and a silo. Very simple, but you had to come up with different thumbnails for how to draw a barn and a silo.
oh, and oh, it's different. The drawing is actually a different like direction to it.
A different, yeah, each one is a different composition.
Chemical composition. Sorry.
Yep.
Ooh. All right.
What do you think?
I will try it.
Good.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So again, and they don't all need to be perfect. They don't all need to be good, but you're just trying different ideas, and it's about trying and experimenting and playing around and seeing what you like. And then you're like, oh, these aren't all that good, but maybe I really like this one. I can take this one and
Yeah,
do
it
that.
is. I really like the 3 and the number 2. I really like number 2. I don't know why, but it's just like, you know, under the sun, and then I see the shadow and so far away, just like, wow, okay. I will more focusing on the building, but also I was focusing on the ground. But
Yeah. Yeah, you see more of the landscape in that one.
yeah. I like you know, a lot. Just like open area. I like that much. I like so much about it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good word there. Negative space, we call that. That's gonna be a big part of the class later on, making negative space. So yeah, when you're working on thumbnails, think about making that focal point bigger or smaller. So yeah, like number 2 has a really small focal point. Number 3, the focal point is a lot bigger. So that's a good way to get variety. So try big focal points, small focal points, medium focal points, and just see how that changes your composition and see what one you end up liking best.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll have this one due next week.
Next week first, you said that at the beginning of the next week, right?
Yeah, exactly, before next. So I gotta go change the due date after class. I'll change the due date. Sound good? Any other questions on any of that? Thumbnail sketching, creative process?
Yeah, it sounds good for me.
Cool. Okay, let's talk about shape and form. Shape and form. All right. So shape versus form, they have a lot of things in common, but for us, we are going to be really dealing with shape in this class. So that's really going to be a way that I want you guys to focus about creating art with good shape design, and kind of trying to ignore form and think more about shape. So form is basically 3-dimensional and shape is 2-dimensional. And so since we are creating work on a 2-dimensional surface, shape is going to be more important than form. Another really good way to think about shape is silhouette. So shape and silhouette, I will use those 2 words interchangeably. They go hand in hand, and that's going to be kind of how I want you to think about artwork and how I want you to think about designing your composition is with really good shapes. So form is when you draw something like this. I think, did I draw this little cube the other day? So form, this is trying to look like a 3-dimensional cube. We got shadows on there. We got lines to show that it's 3D, but it's not actually 3D. You know, it is 2-dimensional on the surface of my computer screen, whereas you guys are drawing this on the surface of your sketchbook. So even if we are drawing something 3D or we are looking at a piece of artwork that's 3D, I want you to think about the shape and the silhouette. So what's the silhouette of this? So to find that silhouette, you just fill it in solid black. That allows you to see the silhouette. Okay, so there is the shape. So you may do the same thing for something like this. You got a cube, here is going to be a sphere. Got all these shadows on here. So this is why I was saying, like, a lot of students get overly concerned with those details. So things like shadows are details, things like texture is details. And it looks kind of cool, you know, to draw that, make it look 3D. But for a lot of us, you lose track of the silhouette when you do that. So then the silhouette for this one is very simple. Look at that silhouette, nice and easy to draw. So you got to kind of switch your mind to just seeing those flat shapes. Flat shapes should take priority. As you work. So you guys see the difference there between that 3-dimensional form and that 2-dimensional silhouette shape?
Yep.
So it is a little bit of a, you know, kind of a jump and a trick to kind of see that way. So you have to, you know, we'll practice how to look at that and how to create some things that are done just in silhouette to make them really stand out and make it work. So that's another advantage of working in thumbnails too. You don't have time necessarily or the space to draw and make things look, you know, 3-dimensional and add in, you know, shading. People talk about shading so much, but we're not going to be doing any shading in this class. Shading isn't really something that we're concerned with at all in this class. We are just dealing with this flat 2-dimensional shape. So let's do another version here really quick. I'm going to just pull up a photo. White. Can you guys see me right now? Is my video working or not?
You mean see your
See you.
face?
Oh, you
Your
can.
face,
Okay.
right?
Just not working on my computer. That's okay.
All right.
Okay. So look at this cool building right here. So a lot of details in here. You can clearly tell this is a 3-dimensional shape. We have perspective. We have lines in here that show that it's 3-dimensional and make it look 3-dimensional. We have cool details of like the texture here. So when I'm deciding on, you know, I like to draw buildings a lot. I think they're a lot of fun. When I have, you know, buildings in a comic book or an illustration, I want to try and do that. So, but when I'm deciding on something that will look good in a drawing or an illustration, I want to try and think about shape and then try and eliminate form, form and details as well. So you want to not focus on form, F-O-R-M. And just focus on shape. So I'm going to try and draw this just as a silhouette shape. So I'm just looking at that outside edge. If I filled in this form just completely black, and if it reads as a silhouette shape, then that means it's a lot easier to then add details. And oftentimes I will kind of first get the silhouette figured out. And then after that, you can always add in details later on. And if this shape looks cool and it looks interesting and it looks unique, then I know it's probably working well. You can always change things and exaggerate things a little bit as well. I kind of want to make this tower a little bit more pointy. But there's no details in here right now. Like maybe I want to come up here and add like a little flag on top of this tower. That could look good. And if I fill this in, like, okay, cool. This is looking like a nice, interesting silhouette shape. This could be, you know, a building in a comic panel or just maybe a drawing in my sketchbook. But it's always a good way to kind of test your shapes as you're working on thumbnails, as you're working on different parts of your project. So just fill it in as a silhouette and see how it's working. See if it reads well, see if it's unique, things like that. So what I can do now is like, okay, that's a cool silhouette. I can tell there's a tower here. I can tell there's some sort of building. But you can always come back later on and then add more detail. So I can like come back on here and add some details as I go, if I want. I can also leave it as a silhouette. So it depends on the purpose of my drawing. If I'm just doing a, you know, a quick sketch or quick thumbnail, I can just leave that as a silhouette. I don't even need to add details, but depending on what I do, all those details will kind of fit inside of this silhouette I've created. And other details are things like texture, patterns. So like, you know, I may have some brick texture in here, kind of texture to make things look beat up and old. Texture of like shingles here on the roof. Okay, but first we got the shape. We said that shape was good. So shape should come first and then form and details, okay? So when we look at something like this here, even if you're just looking at it, you want to try and kind of squint your eyes at it, and that will help you to see the silhouette shape. And then when you draw it, you can you'll know, oh, that's going to turn out to be a good shape. And you want to focus on making sure that shape's right before you add any details. All right, so a question you should always ask yourself is it a good shape? All right, how can you tell if something is a good shape? Is something a good shape? That means, does it read well? Is it clear to the viewer? And can someone looking at your drawing tell what that shape is, what that silhouette is? So I'm going to do a drawing and let's see if this comes out to be a good shape. So we're just going to do a drawing of a house. I'll use this little house as example throughout the quarter here. So what do you guys think? Is this a good drawing of a house? Does it look like a house? Could it read as a house?
With the details in, yeah.
But
When you when you shade it in, it's just gonna look like a square.
exactly, that's gonna kind of be the problem. So it's an okay drawing. It's fine. It's nothing spectacular, but if this is something like maybe this was the focal point of your drawing for a thumbnail or something you were going to turn in as part of a project and you had some houses in there, I would say, yeah, the drawing's good. It's a good drawing, but is it a good shape? And once you start to fill this in, you start to realize, no, it's not a very good shape. So that is how you can always test something to see if it is a good shape or not, is does it read well? Because when people look at your artwork, they're not going to see the details first. They're going to see a big square. And yeah, the details kind of save it and help it in the end, but ultimately it's what the shape looks like. That's how people are going to kind of judge your drawing. The shapes read quickly to the viewer, and that kind of determines or helps set the stage for your overall composition. So let's just think of a way we can redraw this house to make it read better. Well, what we want to do is we probably want to show the angle of that roof a little bit more. You want to create a more interesting silhouette shape for that. I'll have the roof overhang there a bit so we can see the difference. The big thing I want to do is move this chimney up. So move this chimney up so that breaks the silhouette and creates a more interesting shape. And then I can even come down here and add something like a little bush down there. That would help as well. So I can still add those same details on there, the windows and stuff like that. But now, hopefully, if I've done a good job, this will read a lot better as a silhouette. And really just thinking about how to stay away. So now, even when this is silhouetted in, that reads much better as a house. So you kind of want to stay away from. There are times where you want to just use the basic shapes of square, circle, and triangle. Those are the most fundamental shapes that you can build with. But especially when you're creating a focal point, or you want something to stand out and be unique, or you're designing something completely, designing something yourself, or you're looking at like a photo to recreate, you want to kind of avoid these shapes. These shapes can be good for like background stuff. So, you know, if I want to put like a city behind here, I could just use some simple rectangle shapes. And that's okay because that's not my focal point. So I could just come here and put some rectangles in the background, and that's fine. Because those are background shapes. Right now, they're not as important. But my focal point shape is what is standing out here. And that focal point shape is really interesting. And that shape now is much more unique and much more interesting there. So as you're working on thumbnails, as you're thinking about turning in a project, always ask yourself about your own work. Is this a good shape? You know, and details like texture, we'll get into adding texture to your work as well, on when and where and how to add details. But all that should be secondary to the silhouette there. All right, and you can create entire compositions just out of silhouettes, and that can be a lot of fun to do. I like to do this a lot for like my comic books. Create a composition that's just using silhouettes and gets rid of all details. So it can be like a good challenge, especially kind of when you're just working in thumbnails, to just think of an entire composition just with silhouette. So sometimes I might, look at your guys' work and be like, oh, that should try doing that same composition, but see if you can do it with just silhouette shapes. Because oftentimes that can be something stronger and more interesting as you work. So I can come up and fill in some of these other shapes with a lighter value to separate them, but they're still just silhouettes. So even without any details, any texture here in this drawing, you still can read really well and create an interesting, unique composition. Okay, any questions on silhouette type stuff, silhouette compositions? How to use details? So luckily Illustrator lends itself really well to working in shape, because as I mentioned, when you're in Illustrator, you're basically just creating different shapes with that. So this is the pen tool I'm using here. You guys will get to the pen tool lesson soon if you haven't already, but this is going to be kind of one of the most important tools we use in this class. But I like to encourage people to think about working in Illustrator as just cutting out little pieces of paper. So you're just going to be kind of cutting out paper in different sorts of shapes, combining it with some simple shapes, combining it with complicated shapes, but they're all just little shapes that you're going to cut out. And then, if you want to add details to, like, a person here, come on, get out. You're just adding more shapes on top of that shape. This is a very quick, not that great example, but hopefully you can kind of get what I mean, where you're just creating those different shapes here, combining them to eventually create a full composition and a full work of art. So that's what's good about Illustrator. It forces us to simplify. It's not easy to just come in here and add shading to stuff and make things look three-dimensional necessarily. So that's what Illustrator is really good at, is forcing you to simplify and forcing you to think in shapes. So it'll kind of have to go from as you're thinking in your thumbnails in shape to then finishing it off with shapes in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, any questions on any of that?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. Let's just look at a few really good shape-based artists here before we go. And kind of see how other artists have used shape. Has anyone seen the show Batman the Animated Series from the 90s?
Not a lot of it, but I recognize some of it.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite animated shows. The artist is Bruce Timm. So he kind of created the look for this show. And, you know, in the 80s, there were a lot of cartoons. If you think about like, you know, He-Man and G.I. Joe and stuff like that. The animators are trying to create like kind of realistic drawings and drawings with a lot of detail. But because of that, the animation was like of poor quality. The movements looked really weird. So when Bruce Timm created this Batman the Animated Series, he wanted to really simplify the design of these characters. And in doing so, he created a really unique look to it.
Oh, okay. Wait, is that the one with long ears?
For the Batman cartoon?
Yeah, yeah, I remember some of this with a really strange, like a cartoon design with long ears.
He's done a few different versions over the years.
Oh yeah, that's why.
Yeah, so he became like kind of the go-to kind of style for DC animated cartoons. He did like Justice League later on, and like the Teen Titans cartoon was kind of influenced by his look.
Yeah, I love version of him.
Yeah. So like, and the reason he became so popular is because that style was so unique. So he really simplified it. So this is kind of the logo and title card for the show. But can you guys count how many shapes are in this this image here? It's like seven or eight shapes here.
I count like at least 10 if you count all the different triangles in his cape right there.
Yeah, these ones. Exactly. But there's no shading. There's no attempt to make things look 3D. There's a few folds in the cape. There's no facial expressions here. There's no like wrinkles of his furrowed brow. Everything's kept really flat and really simple. And that is oftentimes harder to do lots of times, but it creates a really unique look. Let's look at another one from this show. So this is from the intro of the show. So when I would say, is this a good shape? This is a really good shape for the character. You can see exactly who the character is, what the character's doing. There's a sense of movement with the cape blowing in the wind. You get the sense of the strong pose that the character's taking, but all without any details. So just silhouette there. And these buildings, there are some details of windows, a little bit showing three-dimensional shape here and here, and a few details there, but really not much. And so that's what's really unique about kind of this design, is it works really well as a silhouette. Is there one more of his? This is the artist Ivan Earl. So he worked on Sleeping Beauty. If anyone's seen that movie recently by chance on Disney.
I've seen it a long time ago.
Yeah, I suggest watching it again if you have the chance. The story, I don't think the story quite holds up as well, but the animation is absolutely gorgeous. So Ivan Earl was hired as kind of the concept artist, which is an artist that's brought in before any animation starts to kind of define the overall look of the film. And Ivan Earl's style is really about unique shape design. So I really like what he did with the characters here. So each character is made up of just a handful of shapes. Very, very simplified. But I think it's really effective with the look of the overall. It creates a unique look and a unique feel for the animation. So we don't get fingers, facial features, folds in the clothing. It's all just simple flat shapes. These could be cut out of pieces of paper here. And when you get to things like the trees, yes, there's a lot of details and texture in here, but these trees in the background are simple rectangle shapes, simple rectangle there. And then he adds the details on there. So that's like getting that silhouette shape first and then adding details, how I did with that building. And I really like these plants in the foreground. They're kind of just flat, like stamps of shapes almost. Here's another one of his where he designed the background. So he really is using these simple shapes. Look how he does the tree here. Creates a very strong, unique, simple rectangle, and then just puts details on it. A flat circle, and then put details on it. And for the castle, he's kind of creating these long, elongated triangles and rectangles to create a kind of an elegant, delicate look for that castle. So there are some details and some shading, but it's all based on really good shape design. So if you have a chance to watch that movie again, especially the backgrounds in that movie is all based on Eyvind Earl's art. Oh, here's another one of his from the kind of the finale action scene of the story. So a great silhouette for the focal point of the hero and the dragon. Jagged, angular shapes to show the danger of the thorns, jagged, angular shapes to make this guy seem creepy and serpent-like for the dragon. So we looked at like line-based artists last class. So some artists rely more on lines, these artists here rely more on shape for their design. So you'll kind of see as we work through the class to see what how your style develops and what you work on more. I'm not sure the artist of this piece, but I like how this is just flat shapes filled in with different pattern. I thought this was a really cool look. It's basically just a series of silhouettes to design these different people. Especially like right here, you don't even see the legs, but you can see the shoes that kind of, we end up seeing the legs in the negative space there. And then this artist here is literally cutting out pieces of paper with an X-Acto knife. So again, this is a good way to kind of think about when you're making art in Illustrator, how you can design it this way. All right. Any questions on shape or silhouette or how to use that in your compositions? All right, cool. So that's pretty much going to be it for today. So yeah, I will I'll post this drawing challenge, the thumbnail drawing. I'll update this with the due date and stuff. So you guys, it'll be due next. I guess there's technically no class on the 17th. So it'll be due on the 18th, same day as the project one. So, but since you have project one due that day, you know, just kind of manage your time and make sure you get this done. You know, each one of these should take about 5 minutes. So this should be about, you know, a half hour of drawing or so for the thumbnail challenge. And then that project one is due on the 18th. And other than that, we'll have a brief check-in on Wednesday. But let me know if any questions come up in the meantime. Shoot me an email or message me on Canvas. And if you're working on that project one, feel free to send it to me ahead of time and we can work. I can give you feedback that way. But other than that, that will be it for today. And I will see you guys on Wednesday.